Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
All right, what's up, guys? This is part 2 with Courtney Runyon. If you guys missed the most recent episode with Courtney, I just needed to have her on again to dive into a little bit more. We just didn't quite get finished. I wanted to hear more about her story and some of the science behind what is actually going on with the immune system. Really intrigues me personally. I work a lot with patients on this. I'm excited to dive into it with you guys. If you guys missed Courtney's previous episode, Courtney is amazing. She came on and was super open, talked with us about her story with CIDP, and just as a human being in general. So, with Courtney's history of CIDP, she actually developed pretty quick onset paralysis from an autoimmune condition. And I won't spoil the ending. I'll let her talk about it here in a moment. But she's really come full circle, and she has some really interesting insights into the things that may have led to some of this autoimmunity and the things that maybe helped her that might be a little bit different than you think. So we'll dive into the details of that in just a moment. If you want to catch part 1, we also talked a lot about advocating for yourself in the healthcare system and navigating the healthcare system, and also the ability to kind of grow through traumatic experiences, as well as finding humor and resilience in traumatic experiences. So Courtney's the GOAT at that. I swore last time I would do this, and I will when we post this episode. I'm gonna post her YouTube video, one of many, where she's dressed up in silly costumes and wigs and whatnot while she's going through her treatments and therapies, and she found a way to find humor in all of it. So there's a little synopsis for you, but highly encourage you to check it out. And thanks for coming back on, Courtney.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So before we get rolling into some of the science behind some of this, um, give us kind of the give us where you are now. I know we got to kind of how tough things got in the last episode. So you went from thriving, happy, living your life, traveling all over the world to next thing you know, you're in a hospital, and then moving in with your family, which I'm not making that a negative. I know that was such a beautiful time in your life and you shared that. But you were essentially able to do nothing for yourself for a time there. You were essentially completely paralyzed from the neck down, right? And very little ability to do typical daily functional movements that you were used to, and activities that you were used to. So give me kind of the end of that story, if you don't mind, while we just kinda, finished up the end of the last conversation there.
Yeah, starting from when?
Starting from, spoiler, you now, have moved to Mexico by yourself, you're moving, you're living alone, you're hosting retreats,
My happy
you're
ending.
thriving, right? What happened there?
Okay, my happy ending, right? Okay. Well, it was crazy, and we already kind of talked about it, but I did everything I could to get better. And I think people with chronic illness can relate when I say anytime you talk about your anxiety, autoimmune, chronic pain, whatever it may be, people want to fix you, right? They're like, "Oh, have you tried this?" And when you've been living with something like this for a long time, you're like, "I've tried it." Let me stop you right there. And no one wants to get better more than you, right? Like you're the one that has done the research and has tried everything and So it's just kind of funny when people say that because, you're the one living with it. You're the one that's already tried everything. So I tried everything. And as we talked about, finally, I had my turning point and I started getting better after my boyfriend and I broke up. I moved in with my family. My whole recovery lasted about 2 years. The whole experience was about 3. And I had this moment when I was in the hospital. I had lost my job, I went on disability. I lost my house. I moved across the country from my best friends, or my circle of friends rather. And so I was sitting there thinking, okay, every string of attachment I have in my life has been cut. There is nothing about my life that is the same. One of my favorite quotes about resilience, there's many, right? Is that resilience is our ability to allow something to transform us. And I love that. And it essentially surrender, right? Like the ability to surrender control, to allow your life to change. And some people have a really hard time with that for a lot of reasons. One of them, they don't want the invader, the illness, the divorce, whatever it is. They don't want it to change. They don't want it to win. Like that will not win. It will not change me. And we kill ourselves trying to hang on to who we were, when really, if we can surrender and go through the transformation, it's a much more gentle process and it will open doors to another wonderful way of living. I do keynote speaking, and one of the things I always say is I'm living my dream life now. It's just a different dream than the one I had before. And there's so many ways that we can be happy. And I don't mean we as people, I mean you. Like you. There's so many different jobs, lifestyles, groups of friends, activities, hobbies. Like you have infinite things that can actually make you happy. So as things change, yes, doors close, which is life. We go through a death and rebirth over and over and over again in life. So doors close and then other ones open. Our old self dies. Our new self is reborn over and over. And we don't want to stay the same anyways. When you stay the same, you start to feel stagnant in your life. You start to feel like you lack purpose or growth. Like when we're always changing and evolving and meeting new parts of ourselves, that's when we feel very, very alive and fulfilled. So when I'm sitting there, I'm thinking every string of attachment was cut. What do I want to do? So I decided to move to a foreign country and live by the beach. And one of my favorite parts of that is at the time, all I had was a small disability payment, that it wasn't enough to live by myself in Texas, where I'm from, but it was enough to move to Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. That's what I mean by it's like, look at what you have. And at that time, I had nothing. I had no strings of attachment, no boyfriend, no house. I didn't have any possessions. I lost them in the breakup. So what does one do when they have no job, no possessions, no money? You can go live by the beach in Cabo and have ocean views in your condo and go sit at the beach and live in a slower pace of life because I was still disabled and slow. But everyone's slow in like island beach towns. It's not an
Mhm.
island, but that whole island vibe. So I felt right at home there. Everybody's walking slow and relaxing. And when I got there, I thought, okay, what else can I do? How can I integrate my major life change in a way that adds value to my life instead of ruining it? I thought I can start throwing wellness retreats. I had this crazy story. I had this crazy transformation. I lost my whole life. You know, I can hold space for other people to build up their resilience and reconnect to themselves in nature and fun and mushrooms and ceremonies. So I started hosting wellness retreats, doing motivational speaking, doing resilience coaching. So I'm going back to that phrase, I'm living my dream life. It's just a different dream. But I created that dream out of what I had available to me, turning, almost alchemizing the bad, quote unquote, bad things, the chaos, the hard things that happened to me, and transmuted them into something fun and beautiful and nourishing and with purpose.
That's incredible. I have always been so curious about what is it in certain people that can take a hard thing and grow from it versus take a hard thing and collapse. And it's literally been one of my eternal questions because I watch people sometimes do that. It's so inspiring and people are drawn to it, right? So I'm glad you're out there kind of sharing this with people. Um, I know there's also something you did in terms of walking across the country. So give me the elevator pitch of that if you don't mind, because I know this was a big goal, and I believe there was like a little bit of shifting to it. But it's like a pretty epic hero moment for someone who was initially in your position with your paralysis. So give us that summary if you don't mind.
Yeah, anytime that we don't feel at home in our bodies, at home in our lives, where we feel like you're going through, life has ups and downs, we're in the down, and we just can't seem to find the joy in where we're at because there's somewhere else we'd rather be. We can find joy in who we're becoming. We can find hope and a reason to get out of bed in the morning excited because of where we're headed. And that can be booking a vacation in the future. That can be deciding you're going to run a marathon, which is what I did. When I was in the wheelchair, I thought, how fun would it be when I walk again to run a marathon with my sister who's been taking care of me and she runs marathons? That'd be such a hero moment. But then I realized I'm never going to be able to run again. I have permanent disabilities. That dream will never come true. So going back to, okay, what dream can I have and bring into reality that I can do that would be amazing since I can't run a marathon? And let me also add this piece to it. I had been going to therapy. I'd been going to hospitals and nursing homes, and it smelled weird. It was dirty walls. And I had this moment of like, I want to keep getting better. I understand and recognize the importance of giving everything I have to healing and therapy and getting stronger. And I was 33 at the time. I wanted to feel like I was still living my life to the fullest at the same time.
Mhm.
So, how can I live my life to the fullest at the same time and keep getting better and healing and, do something that still feels awesome, even though I can't run a marathon to celebrate walking again? So, I decided to hike the Camino de Santiago in Spain, which is a 500-mile hike where you basically start at the border of France and Spain and then walk across the whole country of Spain, northern Spain, until you get to the ocean, basically. And so there was a few parts I did take a taxi because I didn't have the balance and strength. I mean, you're walking across the country. But for the most part, I hiked most of this trail, the most popular there's several Camino de Santiago's. I walked the Francis. And I hiked 500 miles, averaging 14 miles a day, across Spain.
How long after your hospitalization was this?
Yeah, it was about 2 years after.
That's incredible. You're so rad. I love that story. That's just epic. I love I think the lesson for me that I'm learning from hearing all of this is just the perspective shift, right? Like like it's a tale as old as time when life gives you lemons, right? Like what are you gonna do? And you can sit and you can become a victim to it. And that's a bummer, because that story doesn't end. You could do that forever, or you could have our perspective shift and make the most of where you are and have like this amazing new experience that you never would have probably imagined. In like you said, this other life that you could have had, right? There's so many ways we can be happy. That's rad. So I want to talk a little bit next about some of the science behind and the human experience. Like, let's blend them, right? Uh, Behind some of the things we touched on last time. So there's a couple of topics I'd like to dive into a little more deeply, because I find it personally really fascinating, but also this just comes up time and time and time again. The first of which is the intersection of empathy and illness. I know this is something you're passionate about speaking on. We touched on it last time. There's actually a lot of evidence on different iterations of this. There's evidence of increased empathy in individuals have an increased likelihood to have inflammation. There's evidence of people who have experienced traumatic events, even very, very early in life, have a significant increased risk of both PTSD and autoimmunity. And then that, begets like the PTSD begets more dysfunctional immunity, right? Um, there's evidence on chronic relational trauma, and the outcomes for our inflammation and our immune system, which kind of touches on some of the things you mentioned, I think, with your prior relationship. I could go on. Attachment styles are related to, insecure attachment styles are related to chronic inflammation. Like, this is just so pervasive. I do our autoimmune consults at Wild Health. I know a lot of our listeners probably know I was diagnosed with lupus in medical school and I had my own journey with the healthcare system, realizing that, like, the kind of canned classic Western medical answer of start on this medication to suppress your immune system, take it forever, and you'll slowly get worse was not it for me. I was super curious about what led me there and how I could get out of that. And for me, mindset and I like to tell people learning how to say no was probably the single most helpful thing in my healing, which ties in a lot, I think, with what you're saying. So I'm just so curious what your experience has been. Was this just a personal experience in terms of your intersection of your empathy and some of your relationships and your illness, like you shared? Or is this something you see? I know you talk to hundreds, if not thousands, of people with chronic illness now and a lot with autoimmunity. Is this something you see as a pattern? Like, do you see a type of person that this typically happens to? Like, expand on this a little bit if you don't mind, because it's one thing to hear the science and the literature, which is probably not talked about enough, but I think the human stories are a lot more compelling and, like, they hit people in a different way.
Yeah, I love this topic. I mean, because it really hit me hard. So when I made a compilation video of my recovery from being paralyzed with the neck down in the wheelchair to walking again. Who doesn't love a good walking again from paralysis story? And it went super viral. It has over 50 million views across different media platforms. So as you can imagine, I received thousands of messages from people. And I learned a lot from these messages. One was one of the more common questions I got was, how do you stay positive when life knocks you off your feet? Basically, is what people would say. But when I started talking to everyone, I noticed an undeniable percentage of the people reaching out to me that had autoimmune specifically, but also things like fibromyalgia, chronic pain, mystery illnesses, were nurses.
Mm,
I mean, I'm talking, it had to have been 50%. And I wasn't looking for this. I wasn't
mhm.
trying to create some kind of science. I just was like, man, there's a lot of nurses with autoimmune and chronic illness and that type of stuff. So I just started thinking about it. I'm like, is it because they're working in hospitals? Maybe they have a higher risk because they have more exposure to viruses and bacteria. I was like, is it like the long work hours? I just noticed it. And you can find research about the high rates of, illness with healthcare workers. But then I started really talking to them. And I figured out two things. The first, and of course, like, because of my own experiences, I'm trying to figure myself out, right? Like, how did this happen to me? I don't have childhood trauma. I had a perfect, like, as far as let's talk about, you were gonna say 1 to 100, how your childhood was. I mean, I gotta be 95 to 100. Like, I'm very lucky, and I say that because Gabramate's work, genius. Like, he is brilliant. I love his work, and he just talks about how childhood trauma plays such a big factor in, as you said, your immune system and chronic illness. But, well, then why did I get autoimmune.
Yeah, I mean, the ACE study, it's one of the most this is even one talked about in traditional medical school, right? Adverse childhood events and
Mhm.
experiences, increases risk of not only autoimmunity, but, every other chronic illness known to man. So it's a like, it is one of the most common topics, I think, brought up in this space.
Yeah, and I mean, it's undeniable research that, adverse childhood experiences, you even just anxiety, yeah, so but I didn't have that, so it's like, well, what happened there? So
Mhm.
when I started, you know, diving into these conversations, I found that at least 90% of them had some kind of chronic relational stress at the time of the initial onset of their symptoms. That was one thing I figured out. The second, that these nurses, it wasn't that they were working in hospitals, it was that were highly empathetic. So the whole nurses thing, and I figured that out because the other half of people that I talked to that weren't healthcare workers, I noticed like threads that these people were highly sensitive, highly empathetic people. So in healthcare, they're taking care of their patients and they're just like, "Oh, I can feel their pain. They're worried about them at night." Like they take on the stress of the family and the caretakers having to communicate. "I know, I'm so sorry. Like we're doing the best we can." So they're in a chronic empathy environment. Then a lot of the other ones are people who are in service. They're just service-oriented people. They are caring people. They're overgivers where they overgive their time. They say yes when they don't have enough time
Mhm.
because they wanna help and they feel bad saying no. They're people pleasers. People become people pleasers because you can feel this isn't the only reason, but one of them, you can feel other people's emotions so deeply. You wanna make them happy, you wanna fix it so that you feel better, they feel better.
Right.
So, like, there's so many people saying, "Oh, people pleaser, it's low self-worth." Maybe there's some work to do there where you feel like, "Oh, I just want everyone to like me," because but also or could it be that some people are people pleasers not because of an insecurity, but because they just feel the world around them and wanna help? So, I kinda noticed that and thought, "Is that even a possibility?" Like, empathy is such a good thing. Like, is there a relationship there between empathy and inflammation? So I did a little research. This is before ChatGPT. Did a little research, and I did find a 2015 study that no one's talking about. They tested sets of parents. I believe there was 46 sets of parents before and after experiencing empathy for their child that was suffering. They found that empathy causes systemic inflammation in the body. While experiencing empathy for someone that you care about who's struggling, your systemic inflammatory markers in your body go up. Coincidentally, the person receiving empathy, the person that's suffering, receiving the empathy, their systemic inflammatory markers go down.
Super interesting. I think this begs the question of, you know, what do you do with this information? How do you maintain who you are as a feeling like empathetic person and not carry on, like not carry the pain of others to your own personal detriment, right? Like how have you done that personally? I know my own journey with that. Like this resonates deeply with me and my experience with autoimmunity, and I can think of so many patients that I work with that this is a pretty accurate representation in their own iteration of it. But I'm just curious how you've navigated those waters, because I think sometimes when people learn how to put boundaries down, it's like really strict and really rigid at first. It's like putting shoes on the wrong feet at first. Like anything we try is kind of awkward and clunky. Um, but like you said, like, being a deeply feeling person is something a lot of people wouldn't want to completely give up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Or give up at all. So how do you navigate that balance, where you maintain your health and you maintain the safety of your body, but maintain your sense of self, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I have an answer for this, and this one's a little bit harder for me to admit. Um, so at through this journey of trying to understand, how my body broke down, I mentioned the nurses like chronic empathy in a professional setting, but there's also that chronic relational stress, right?
Mhm.
And you don't necessarily have to be an empathetic person to have chronic relational stress. And it's such a buzzword right now, the whole empath with narcissist, relationship. Other ways you can look at that, there are other dynamics similar or our anxious attachment with avoidant attachment. I mean, there's like 5 different ways of saying the same thing that are similar where you're in a position of chronic relational stress, right? And I was in one of those dynamics. And when I found this study about, you know, basically chronic empathy causing chronic systemic inflammation, I went straight victim mode. I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like I was in a relationship where empathy was demanded of me constantly. And what I mean by that is I was in a relationship where his lifestyle choices violated my boundaries constantly. And I loved him very much. So what's interesting is when someone is highly empathetic, they can also do mental gymnastics very well. They can listen to what someone's saying, when someone's convincing them um, to excuse their behavior. You're able to have a insane superpower of understanding where they're coming from. So we're like, yeah, okay, like, and you're able to go into kindness, compassion, um, and we get ourselves in these situations where we can be, the word manipulated is coming to mind, but that's not the right word. It's like, um, we have a very good way of being able to see where someone else is coming from and almost allow it. Or but part of that is, when we're in these types of dynamics and these types of relationships for our own coping mechanisms, for our own self-preservation, we have to make what they did okay so that we feel not angry or can make the relationship work. So we're constantly I was constantly convincing myself to make things okay with me that were not okay with me. Saying yes when I meant no to make someone happy, people pleasing. And also, someone that is more narcissistic, their needs tend to be more important than other people's needs, because they lack the empathy to feel what the other person is experiencing with their choices or their needs. So the empathetic person in these dynamics tends to put their needs on the back burner because they can understand the needs of the other person and want to fix it, want to help, want to support. And I just kind of picked up on something the other day where I'm like, well, why does a highly empathetic person want to do that? Stay with someone like that. And I got an answer. And someone with that, you know, self-grandiosity, self-importance, which is a trauma response from their childhood, by the way.
Sure.
So, like, I have compassion for people
Where
with that.
there's empathy for that, right?
Empathy for the person that
Right. You're
ha
doing like, it's yeah.
has been forced to lean into their narcissistic tendencies as a
Protective.
coping for
Yeah.
neglect and abuse and things.
Sure.
Okay? So, um, but what I learned is they ignore their imperfections. They see themselves as perfect. They also ignore your imperfections and see you as perfect as well, the love bombing. I was like,
None.
"Oh," and I did feel perfect through the eyes of my partner in that relationship, and it felt really nice. So, the love bombing, quote, unquote, but just it's being able seeing yourself through the eyes of a narcissistic person is actually really nice. You're like, "I am perfect. I can save them. They do need me." Like, so anyways, where I'm getting to though, that was like after I kinda saw that chronic empathy can cause chronic systemic inflammation, I had to look at myself a little deeper, and I played the victim in my whole relationship. I felt like the victim. I'm like, my boundaries are constantly crossed. I'm always being pushed to put my needs aside, to make what he needed, a priority, and I did it. I stayed. I did it.
Right.
And the thing about that is when our boundaries are being crossed, when we cross our own boundaries, the automatic emotion is resentment. Brene Brown's research. Also, chronic unmet needs and self-sacrifice. And when you do this for long enough, you burn out. You get paralyzed in your life. Yeah. And the thing is, there's nothing that's going to cause more, there's no amount of green juices you can drink or meditations you can do to offset a
Not
body,
even in Cabo.
not even in Cabo, to offset chronic feelings of being unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I'm hearing from you is like you still choose, right? I think that's the common thread here. Like whether it's your health condition, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a career choice, like how do you become how do you take responsibility of your own outcome? Because there is some gain from empathetic people. This is a knowing conversation because I am one of these people. This has been a personal journey. Like this is a knowing conversation for me. Like I relate here deeply and this has been like my own personal journey with autoimmunity as well. So I'm definitely not like pointing the lens only outward here. Um, you know, there is a gain from empathetic people, I believe. You feel good when you care for others, right? Like there's altruism probably too for a lot of people. But there's some personal gain as well. Like there's and the energy behind where that comes from might shift on a moment to moment depending on kind of where you're at, right? And so how do you take that responsibility of your outcome? Are you choosing to stay in the relationship or are you choosing to, you know, I invest to a degree that you might not have the resources and energy for your patients at work or whatever it may be, right? Um, and at the end of the day, like, the buck stops with you, right? Like, you are the creator of your own outcome, and I think that's the coolest part to me, like, I like to share this with patients, and I learned this myself, like, it's not your fault what happened, but, like, how do you're the only one that can write a different ending. Like, you're the only one that can take responsibility for the outcome. And so I think this is a really hard work for people to do, and really hard to even, like, access and admit for some people. Really brave of you to share. I think it'll be really helpful for people to hear, because I think not only, like, did you feel like a victim in that scenario, but I think society kind of views people as, like, the victim in this scenario, right? Like, the the good one, right? The helper. There's a lot of accolades that come with this, but to what, like, personal detriment at times, right? So, super interesting. I wanna ask before we dive into a little bit of a different modality of healing before we wrap up, that we've both experienced, I wanna ask a little bit besides the relational shifts that you made, what do you think was the most influential for your healing? So I know you did a little bit of of both worlds, right? I like to think of these as separate worlds. They're not totally separate, but there's this conventional medical world, and you were immersed in it. You were open to treatments. You were finding the right providers, etc. You shared the big relational shift that you made and how you think that deeply impacted your healing. You've touched on some of like the personal, emotional work or shifts. I don't know if you would consider it work. Any other big changes you made with your lifestyle, your mindset, etc., that you attribute to getting better, being able to walk across country after being paralyzed?
Uh, yeah, community. Um, I started sharing on Facebook, just couldn't have been more authentic. I even had one video where I had snot hanging out of my nose because I was crying. Uh, I couldn't lift my arms to wipe it because I was paralyzed. So, I mean, like, very, very at that point, I was like, "I don't care. I'm paralyzed the neck down, like, I'm not trying to date right now." Um, but it was very therapeutic to as I started sharing my story online, I named my autoimmune character Unicorn. It was almost like my alter ego that fights autoimmune and
I
has
love it. I didn't know where that came from.
has a really good attitude. Well, it actually came from because I said I felt like a unicorn because the doctor said I had atypical case, which means it's not a real like, there's not anyone else that has exactly
You're
what I
so
have.
special.
And then I thought I was like, "Man, I'm a unicorn, this doesn't exist." And then since my name's Courtney, someone called me Unicorn, so that's how that started, but Unicorn became this, like, character, and I almost disassociated, like, I was still Courtney, but Unicorn was the one with the autoimmune, and I started writing, and that was actually really helpful, like, I learned later that's, like, something you do in psychology is, like, give your anger a name, make it a character, like, when it's something you wanna separate from that feel that you don't want to be your whole identity, that's painful, you can
Oh, there's
separate
a
it.
whole field of psychology on parts work.
Yeah, but I did it on accident. I didn't even, like
I love it.
what the cool part was I started writing this story for Unicorn, so, like, it was like I was writing a like, I was looking at it as separate. I'm like, "What would be fun for Unicorn to do next? Ooh, Unicorn could walk across the country. Unicorn could move to Mexico. What if Unicorn started dating?" And I got really excited to, like, create this story and share it online. It was actually really, really helpful, like, really healing, and being so public about it held me accountable, and it made it exciting, like, to share, like, "Oh, I can't wait to tell whoever's following my story, like, the next cool thing that Unicorn's doing." So that was really helpful, but it also built a community. People started following my story, like, every time I felt sad, I got all these messages like, "You're so inspiring." Like, because they see you have a good attitude, it's helping me, it's inspiring me to be happy in my trauma too, and that gave it so much meaning and purpose, and, when we are going through something hard, if there's no lessons there, if there's nothing good about it, if there's, if we can't find the meaning in it, then it's just this thing that sucks. But through that building of community, um, like, we're not meant to heal alone. We're meant to heal in community, like, through co-regulation, through people uplifting us and, seeing the good parts of us through the eyes of others, having empathy,
Mhm.
um, being held by others. I mean, community is really, really important. I heard a statistic the other day that 80% of happiness is community. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but I heard it and I believe it. But I also wanted to circle back. You said a couple things that stood out. I just wanted to comment on real quick. So the just this week, I asked ChatGPT, I said, "What's the opposite of victim?" Because that's something if I could say there's of those thousands of messages I got from people, I noticed differences between people who were resilient, able to move on from difficulty quickly, and those that get stuck, that just are just
Mm.
living in their trauma or their pain. And if I could only say one difference between the 2, that there's many, but the biggest one was whether you see yourself as a victim or not. And what people that don't see themselves as a victim or they felt like a victim and they decided, "I'm gonna take back ownership of my life and my well-being. I can, I will, I wanna do it with humor and grace. I wanna learn from this." They got better. The ones that are still blaming or feeling bad, like, "I can't believe this happened to me." like my stupid narcissistic ex-boyfriend,
Mhm.
like my friends don't get sick, why me? They don't go anywhere, and actually their health doesn't get better either. So that's the number one thing I saw. So the other day I'm like, okay, well, if we're not a victim, who are we? What's the opposite of victim? I'm like, is it the hero? Could it be the villain? Like, I was like, actually, what is the opposite of a victim? You want to know what it is?
Yes.
A creator.
I like that.
I wasn't expecting that. I didn't really know. So a victim is, you know, their life is happening to them. They're not in control of their own life. That's what I was looking for. They're not in control of their own life. That person, that illness, that car accident, that breakup,
Yeah.
that person that stole your money, like they're the ones in charge of your well-being, and you're at the mercy of whatever they do. A
It's such
creator,
a bummer way to
yeah, and I've done it. I played the victim with my
Sure.
ex thing. A creator takes ownership and they create their life. They take 100% radical responsibility for their life, and they look at the past, they're like, "Well, that, you know, I'm the creator of my life." Maybe you didn't create that RAPE. Maybe you didn't create that chronic illness, but you can create your life after.
You are the only one that can.
So I thought that was a beautiful way. The
Yeah.
other thing you said is you talked about it might not be your fault. I love the phrase, because some people say taking 100% responsibility means you created those bad things that happened to you. And I think there's some value in thinking that way so that you don't fall into the victim. And like
Yeah.
sometimes, like, we're not like, there's bigger things at work than
Well,
us.
it's not your fault if you have a genetic predisposition
No,
for this thing. It's not your fault if some massive trauma happens to you or your family. I mean, shit happens, right?
natural
Like,
natural disaster, a flood, like the flooding in Texas, like,
oh, goosebumps.
I mean I don't know, like, that's a hard sell for me that we have 100% responsibility of our life, and that's a lot of pressure, but we can be the 100% creator where we dance with life. We are friends with life, we allow life to happen, and we create who we are and create our life
Mhm.
out of what we have available to us at all times.
I love
The
that.
third thing I wanted to mention is you God, what did you say? Like there was something you said along the lines of we want to fix or save or help other people. Like we have empathy, so we can use our strengths at something like that. Um, but I wanted to mention where I see people really get in chronic stress, a lot of ways, but one of the ways is constantly wanting to be the savior. Like, you take on, like, "Oh god, but they're going through a hard time, I gotta be there. I need to help them move. I need to be there for them and listen to them every time they call."
Yeah.
We want to be the savior. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I see this not only with people with others, but also with themselves. Like I call it chasing the fix in autoimmunity. Like they're always looking, it puts you in this state of hypervigilance as well, because you're constantly trying to like fix things. It's a sense of
Yes.
control, like what you mentioned before. This like
Mhm.
surrender of control that has to happen for healing. If you're constantly like surveying the people around you for how you can help them or these like micro moments, like you said, people empaths can read a room, right? And if you're constantly looking for how you can be of service and how you can help and how you can fix disaster, it's putting your mind and your nervous system in this like low grade fight or flight, right? It's a really hard place to. I would argue maybe an impossible place to heal from.
Right. So, let me offer something that can be life-changing if you are a savior. I had after my video went viral, I had so many people following along and sending me messages. So, one day, I just thought it'd be fun to throw out the question, "What are you the most proud of in your life?" And can you agree with me that when you feel proud of yourself, you have more self-love, higher self-worth, higher value, and more courage to face things that are scary and more bravery if you feel proud of yourself? So I said, what in your life are you the most proud of? And it was only 2 answers. I got maybe a couple hundred responses, but it was only 2 answers. And it was about 50-50. The first was my family. I'm the most proud of my family. The second was I went through something really hard and I didn't give up. So let's embrace that for a minute. If someone goes through something really hard and they don't give up, they grow more self-worth, self-confidence, they feel proud of themselves, more courageous, more brave. If you're the savior and you want to come in and fix something for someone before they can fix it for themselves, what are you robbing from them? So I want you to
Their
really,
best moment, right?
yeah, like I know it's hard to watch someone struggling. I know it's hard to watch someone making poor choices, especially when you know you could help. I know it's hard to see someone in pain when you feel like you could take it away from them and take it on for yourself. But are you really saving them? What are you saving them from? So it's hard to allow someone to learn their lessons and learn to save themselves. It's hard to watch, but people need a cheerleader, not a savior. Why don't you empower them instead? Why don't you tell them you can, you will, I believe in you, instead of you can't on your own, I need to save you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let people feel proud of themselves.
Yeah. I love that. I constantly need to remind myself of this with patients as well. Um, you know, the people that are most struggling in this, I like to call it like emotional and nervous system limbo. Um, I wanna swoop in, and tell them it's gonna be okay and protect them and fix them, and there's some of that that needs to happen as a provider, but there's a lot of that, like, supporting their own journey of healing and mindset, so that they can recognize these strengths in themselves, and that's the only thing that's gonna promote, like, sustainable healing, right? Um, Amazing. I wanna just quickly pick your brain on something that probably shouldn't be a quick subject. This is a little bit of a curveball. Did you feel like psychedelics were influential in your healing? I ask this because one, I've experienced that, not from my autoimmunity, but I'm not sure if our listeners are aware of this or not, but I've spoken on it publicly. But my husband and I experienced 5 miscarriages before I was diagnosed with a genetic condition called a balanced translocation, which we found out was causing them. And we're blessed to have our son through IVF now, and it's wonderful. But it was the single hardest thing I think I've ever been through, and my experience actually with you, Courtney, with the guided psilocybin ceremony, was the single most healing thing I think I've ever experienced. My husband and I actually did this together, and we actually had a similar experience, like a joined experience, which I don't know if this is something you hear about much, um, where after that experience, I still see what happened to us sad. I didn't lose those memories or those feelings, but they do not evoke the same physiologic response in my body. Prior to that, the idea of getting pregnant again made my heart race, made me clammy, like it was involuntary. Um, and after that, it just wasn't there. And actually, I found joy thinking of some of those little souls and still do, because of that experience. And it was profoundly influential on me. And I know the research is there for psychedelic assisted therapy as well. The research is very strong and getting stronger in some very big name institutions for autoimmunity, for PTSD, for major depression, refractory depression, um, where there can be this kind of like opening and release of these traumatic experiences or these really hard things that you're kind of holding on to and repressing, like you mentioned previously, like repressed emotion and resentments, right, can lead to disease. Um, so I was just curious. I know this is a world you're familiar with. I was just curious if this was influential on your healing, or not, because it definitely was for me, not from an autoimmune perspective, but I venture to say, had I experienced that when my lupus was more out of my control, well, that's an interesting way to say it. When my lupus symptoms were worse, I think it would have had an influential experience on me then as well. I don't know if I was open to the surrender that it would have taken then. Um, I was still pretty locked in and grippy about things. So I'm just curious your thoughts on this. Just this is more of a personal curiosity for me.
Yeah, I love psychedelics. You know, my first experience with psychedelics, my first healing experience with them was ayahuasca, actually, back in 2013, January, back before it was cool. Like, nobody had heard of ayahuasca yet, and, for the sake of time, I'll skip that whole story, but basically, it was the scariest freaking thing I've ever done. I would have done anything to make it stop. I did transcend out of my body with eyes open. I was in a different place. It wasn't like I was dreaming. It was like I was there. I mean, I really can't just and the whole of the earth opened up and there was fire and I was being sucked into the earth. Again, this is like it's actually happening. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. Sparing you the whole story of the journey, which is actually kind of a cool story. I basically, at 28 years old, had an ego death, and I loved myself the next morning more than I ever had. I had so much love and acceptance for myself, and I have ever since. It's been 13 years, and I still feel the effects of that one ayahuasca experience and have this for the most part, full acceptance and love of myself. Of course, I have insecurities. I'm a woman, but my baseline is that. So fast forward, after I moved to Cabo, I started going to some psilocybin mushroom ceremonies, and I was shocked how similar the experience was to ayahuasca, but on a much lower scale. I mean, it wasn't scary, but just the journey, right? That's why they call it tripping. You go on a trip, like you go on a journey. And it took me into this place of unconditional judgment, or I'm sorry, unconditional love without judgment. If I could live there, uh, like it was but that's the thing about psychedelics is they show you what's possible. You get glimpses of things. They lift the veil and do some neurological, repatterning and then you can access it, try to bring it into your integrate it and bring it into your day-to-day life. And that particular experience, I was able to tap into my dad, into what he was feeling, almost like I had floated out of my body and was looking down at him and having that deep empathy and experiencing what he was experiencing with dementia. And I had this without judgment, so I didn't feel pain. Like that, what we were just talking about, that like wanting to save somebody because you can feel their pain. It was like, because you're deciding that pain is bad. And it was like I was able to see him and the loneliness, the fear, um, that he was feeling, like with this motherly, non-judgmental love of like, oh dear one, like I see you and I feel you and I love you. So it was the first it was the seed that was planted of me moving back to Texas to be with my dad as he navigates dementia and ALS because I was able to feel what he was experiencing. Um, so that was very powerful. And since then, I've done a ton of psychedelic ceremonies. I do them at the retreats I host in Mexico. And I've just seen how these ceremonies, these psychedelic experiences, even just mushrooms, which are, in my opinion, the most gentle of all psychedelics. And I've seen people's anxiety permanently improved from
Mhm.
one ceremony. I've heard of microdosing. I've heard of people finally finding forgiveness towards an ex-husband. I've seen people finally get clarity and epiphanies. I call them mushroom epiphanies of where they want to go in the next chapter of their life. This is powerful stuff.
That's amazing. I like the idea of having other tools in the tool belt because I think sometimes accessing some of these emotional patterns, programming, whatever it may be, especially if they are coming from either really early experiences or super traumatic experiences, like we have trouble accessing things for a reason. That's it. That's maybe the best way I can say it because it freaking hurts. It's painful. The body tries to protect us from that, right? And sometimes our bodies can get stuck in these memories and these loops and these ways of being um, that can feel like protection in the short term. And really be to our detriment of our long-term probably ways of being and goals in life, but also our health, right? And I find that some people really struggle to access these things. Like they sometimes get to this place, they're like, okay, I've shifted the diet, I've optimized my micronutrients, I've optimized my methylation, I've, shifted the exercise. Like they're doing all the things, right? And there's something missing. They're still kind of like seeking perfection, seeking control, hyper vigilant, whatever it may be. And they believe they're bought in that it's affecting their health, but like accessing that can be a different story. Like how do you actually like make that leap and make shifts to where your body like it's not just another attempt at control and fixing, but like it's a true surrender. Like how do you actually do that so that the body believes it, right? And it can be really, really tough for people to access. So some tools like this, I like having these as it's an option for people. For some people, it can make sense. And there are ways to do this in a guided, like safe, medically cleared way now, which is beautiful. And there are other things as well that I have seen work really well for people. If psychedelics freak you out for any reason, stellate ganglion block is one that I've seen have night and day changes for people with nervous system resets. There's like daily kind of more gentle somatic work that you can start with. But I just wanted to kind of like open that conversation, if for no other reason than to share that it was like profoundly influential for me. Um, as someone who kind of knew this space well at this point and knew the effects of trauma, like I just was not interested in holding that in my body, but damn, it's hard to release when it's real, So it was really it blew my expectations out of the water. I didn't have super high expectations going into it. And I was just dumbfounded at the outcome. So really special. Thanks for being a part of that with me. And thanks for talking about everything today. This was amazing. You're amazing. And I think this is gonna help a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, my pleasure. There are a few things that bring me more joy than introducing people to mushrooms.
I love it. I love it.
I love, I'm a new somatic therapist. I just got trained in that. And you hear how important you can't heal it unless you feel it, or you have to feel it to heal it. Like, don't suppress your emotions. Trauma lives in the body, but it's like you can hear this all day long, and it's like, but how do I access it? So
But what do you actually do?
I love that you said that if you don't know where to start, try a mushroom ceremony to access those suppressed emotions and help release them. So I love that. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.